Welcome back, everybody, to another video lesson. We're going from zero to producer in 90 days with Ableton Live. I'm your instructor, Torbjorn. Big thanks to Ableton for extending that free trial of Ableton Live Suite version 10 out to 90 days. So while we're at home in quarantine, we can stay creative and stay productive. Last time we all got together, we were talking about compressors. We looked at Ableton's stock compressor, the glue compressor, the multi-band dynamics effect, and the limiter, and we were talking about all of the fundamentals of how those things work so you can understand them not just as a tool that you use for one situation or another, but so you have a good foundation and you can understand how, not just how to use that tool, but why and when to use that tool. Well, we're going to be doing the same thing today with EQs. So an equalizer is what EQ is short for. It's another foundational tool of music production. If you want to make music, recordings, beats, what have you, you're going to need to understand what an EQ does and how to use it. An EQ's job is to control the loudness of individual frequencies. So like the ability to turn the bass up, but not the mids and the treble, or turn the mids down, but not the highs and the lows, etc. Ableton has three audio effects that come with it for EQ. They're called channel EQ, EQ3, and EQ8. Let's dive into the first one of those, which is called channel EQ. So it's very simple, but very effective. It's got three different frequencies that you can control the volume of: low, mid, and high. That middle frequency has a variable number, so you can see we're able to boost it at 1.4 kilohertz. We're able to change the frequency of that boost, but the highs and the lows always stay the same frequency. We can't change those. We can, however, use a low-cut filter. And this low-cut filter is, I don't believe you can change the frequency of it. It looks like it starts at about 100 hertz or maybe 120 hertz. And that just gets rid of all of the bass, the low rumble sounds. So if you're using an EQ on a sound that is not a bass or not a kick drum or not some type of synthesizer with low frequency content, then you might want to use that. In this case, we're looking at a guitar loop. We can see from our spectrum here that there's not really a whole lot going on down below 150 hertz. So we can probably throw that filter on because that's just going to help get rid of some of that sound that might be fighting for space with our kick drum and our bass. We can probably even turn it down a little bit more with this low control. And then let's see what happens when we turn the highs up. I kind of like the sound of the guitar pick hitting the strings comes out a little bit when we bring up that high, but now we're changing the sound quite a bit, so we might want to drag this mid down and bring it up somewhere around 4 or 5 kilohertz just to help balance that out a little bit. Or maybe we might want to use that mid band for somewhere in the lower mids. As you can see, you can turn it up or down, and you get that number represented there in decibels. And of course, we don't want to change the overall volume, because when we turn the effect on or off to decide if we like it better or worse, whichever one is going to be the louder one tends to be the one that our brains will trick us into thinking that that is the one that sounds better. So we want to go here and look at our meter and then turn it off and see if that meter looks lower or quieter. And it actually looks pretty much the same. So if we're just listening to, here's the original sound with no EQ. And then here's with the EQ on. I'm going to bring the highs back down a little bit. I'm going to bring this frequency from the mids up a tiny bit. And then I'm pretty much just going to leave it alone. We'll just give it a little bit more output gain because that change in frequency changed the volume a little bit. So that's pretty much all you need to know for channel EQ. Pretty simple, pretty effective. Let's move on to EQ3. So EQ3 is designed intuitively with DJing and live performance in mind. Here's what it looks like down here. It's really easy to use on the fly, and the controls are really simple. So if you are using this as a performance tool, you might have a physical controller, a MIDI controller, or some type of instrument that's able to interface with those settings via like a USB cable or a MIDI cable. And so the simplicity of how it's laid out just makes it really easy for you to map those to buttons or knobs on a physical controller. It's got 3 bands, low, middle, and high. The low frequency and the high frequency have variable cutoffs or variable frequencies. And this is a little bit confusing because we're able to turn those frequencies on and off, and the low frequency is determining like the center of that frequency. So let me give you an example. I'm going to solo our drums here, and I'm going to turn the bass way up. Actually, I'll solo our drums and I'll turn the mids all the way up, and I'll turn the highs and the lows quite a bit down. And let's look at what's happening when we're changing those frequencies. So you can see it changes at what point is it considered a low frequency and starts getting turned down. Same thing with the high. At what frequency are we determining that that is now part of the high frequencies, which is getting turned down? We've also got these on-off kill switch controls, quote-unquote kill switch. Just means that anything that's considered a low frequency would get turned off. So we're able to get rid of all that bass, or inversely get rid of all the high. And we can determine here, if we turn those off, if that cutoff is 24 dB per octave or 48 dB per octave. 24 means that a little more of the frequencies that you're getting rid of will remain, as opposed to 48 will get rid of quite a bit of those frequencies. That's the easiest way that I know how to explain it. So we're able to use the EQ3 in a pretty simple way to EQ the drums. Let's look at the next one, EQ8. This is Ableton's most powerful EQ effect. They gave it to us in a pretty recent version just a few years ago, and it's an amazing plugin. You've got 8 different frequency bands. Each one of those frequency bands can be any type of filter. You've got high cut times 4, you've got regular high cut, you've got high shelf, you've got a notch filter, bell filter, low shelf, low cut times 4. Any of these can be any of these filters. You can use up to 8 filters on the same instrument, and any of those filters can be any frequency, all the way down from 10 hertz to 22,000 hertz up at the top. This EQ is awesome. Also, you've got this really useful thing here called audition mode. And what we're going to do here is we're going to EQ our bass. And we fixed it up quite a bit in the last video when we put this multi-band compressor on it, but I still want to control that low end a little bit more. And the problem is that it can be really hard on certain speakers to hear what frequency you are trying to hear that sounds like it's too loud or needs to be boosted. In audition mode gives us the ability to, anytime that we're dragging one of these around, we're able to only hear the frequency that you're changing. So here I can definitely tell that that's like our problem frequency, so I can turn that way down. We also have adaptive Q on. You'll notice that as I'm dragging this down, the width of that EQ change is getting kind of narrow, even though I'm not adjusting the Q. Adaptive Q just helps it so that we're not doing too much with our EQ if we need to do some big EQ cuts or boosts. Let's see, we can also, even on our bass sounds, I do still sometimes cut some of that low end just to help keep it clean. And then we can use a high cut filter here because we definitely aren't going to need much above 3,000 or 4,000 hertz on a bass. I think that's sounding pretty good. Let's make sure when we turn it on and off again that we're not getting a big change in volume so that we're just able to hear if we like the EQ change or not. You kind of able to use my meters here to see still something around 200 hertz is like kind of a problem. So I'm going to go in here with this other EQ point and just kind of make another little cut around 200 hertz. And maybe this one we can back off a little bit. I might have been too extreme there. Now that bass is sounding like how I want it to sound. Last but not least, we could look at some creative EQ uses here. So we're kind of just using it to correct problems like mixing type stuff, but you can use it as a creative tool as well. So this vocal here, love the sound of this. It's got this very digital kind of robotic sound to it, Daft Punk-esque, if you will. But it's taking up a lot of frequency space, especially here in the lower mid range. And it's kind of got some stuff up here in the high range that isn't really quite as prominent as I would like it to be. Maybe instead of trying to balance this one out, we can just use an EQ to completely change how it sounds. So I'm going to start with a low cut ×4 and a high cut ×4. And I'm going to just get rid of a lot of our lows and our highs. I like that around 350. And then we could use this to narrow this EQ band here a little bit. Find which frequency kind of sounds cool and musical when it sticks out. Let's keep it right there. And same as always, make sure that when we turn it on and off that we are double checking our volume. We've really changed the sound of it a lot. I think if we add a little bit of reverb, maybe a little bit of delay, that might sound cool. So those are the EQs that come with Ableton, and those are the settings that you'll want to know about how to control them and what they do and where and when you might want to try using them. Let's see if all of those EQ things helped clean up and make this beat sound a little bit better. Nice. I think that turned out pretty good. So that's all the stuff that you got to know about EQing with the EQ effects in Ableton. Channel EQ, EQ3, and EQ8. A lot of powerful tools. And again, just remember that we can use them as corrective tools for mixing. We can use them to get rid of certain frequencies or balance out certain frequencies from sound to sound. Or like we did with the vocal in this video, you can use them for more creative purposes as well and really go in there and like change the sound quite a bit. It's great to have a good foundation and understanding of EQs so that you can understand what knob or what button to push for what outcome you're looking for. Hope you enjoyed this video. I know EQing is not the most satisfying or creative process out there, but it's definitely something that is going to take your sound quality of what you're working on to the next level. So spend time with that EQ, get used to those different frequencies, try to train your ear to hear. It's kind of a weird thing to say, but you can try to train your ear to hear the number so that when you are hearing something that sounds good or sounds bad or sounds like it needs more or less of something, that you can kind of start to know what frequency number to look for. So remember, anything below 100 hertz, that's all your subs, and your low bass, anything from like 100 to 200, that's kind of like your low end where your bottom of your kicks and snares are. 200 all the way up to 1000, those are like your low mid-range frequencies, kind of where the chesty part of your voice comes from, or like the root note of playing a guitar or some instrument that's kind of in that tenor to baritone range. 1000 to about 10,000, that's kind of your upper mid-range. It's all of like your S and T and P sounds and all of the things that make things feel close to you. Those frequencies live there. And anything above 10K, that's your high frequency range, getting into the sounds that are so high-pitched that humans can't necessarily hear them. In theory, we can hear up to 20 kilohertz if you're lucky, but not everybody has that hearing range. So bear those things in mind. Have lots of fun experimenting. EQ, use your meters and use your tools. Remember that something that sounds louder than the thing before it is going to feel like it sounds better. So you always want to match your volumes so you can turn those EQ effects on and off to be able to decide if you feel like the EQing that you did makes it sound better or not. Thanks again, Ableton, for providing all these tools for us. We can stay creative while we're in quarantine. Thank you for watching these videos. Hope you're staying productive and staying creative and making lots of beats. We'll see you in the next video. Peace out.